Okay, so now let's see if this works. So in the middle of that paragraph, that's the brain and the heart. Okay, so even though the brain and the heart, we just established that they play a very important, similar type of a role, or not similar, but equally important, right? We need to have the brain for intellectual understanding and the heart for actualizing that understanding. Nevertheless, we do still say that the brain is on a higher level than the heart. I mean, the head is higher than the torso. But when we say that, we have a question, and this is the question. A question concerning the dominance of the brain can be raised for Ru'usa Deliba, the will of the heart of a person's innermost spiritual desire, which transcends his intellect, is expressed in the heart. Meaning there is a level of the person that is higher than the brain. And the level that's higher than the brain is called Ru'usa Deliba, which is the will of the heart. It doesn't say the will of the brain, it says the will of the heart. So that means that we have the will of the heart, we have the brain, and then we have the heart, basically. So there is a level that's higher than the brain, which is called the will of the heart. So how does that work with this idea that the brain is higher than the heart? So the answer to that is, this, however, reflects the level of the light and life energy, which transcends the life and light energy that is enclosed within the body. Meaning, they're the same way that we talk about how the light of Hashem fills the world in these two levels of the encompassing light and the permeating light. We also talk about the soul filling the body in a permeating light and encompassing the body with an encompassing light. It's the same parallel. So therefore, this idea of, square pegs and square holes and round pegs and round holes, and there's an orderly progression, brain, head, torso, mainly heart and other organs, and legs, that's part of the orderly progression of godliness, let's say in the world, right? It's going to be compared to the world, Hashem filling the world in three ways. That's the parallels, the soul filling the body in these three ways. How Hashem fills the world, how the soul fills the body. We're talking now about how the soul fills the body. The next section of the Gemara is going to talk about how Hashem fills the world in these three stages too. Like, what does that parallel in the world? And in addition to this, like square pegs and square holes, round pegs and round holes, head, torso, legs, there's also a higher level of the soul that's an encompassing level of the soul, similar to how there's also a higher level of godliness which encompasses the world. And this Ru'usa Deliba, the will of the heart, belongs to that section, which is an encompassing section, which transcends the life and light energy that's enclosed within the body. The life and light energy that's enclosed in the body, the highest level is the head. But the whole system of the enclosed level of godliness in the body, the enclosed level of the soul in the body, is a lower level of the soul and of godliness than this surrounding level. So the Ru'usa Deliba is a different type of soul power, which is higher than the type of soul power that permeates the body, of which the head is the highest. Is that clear? Should I say it again?
Can
I?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Say it again.
Yeah. So there's two. The whole thing that we're talking about now, this part that we're talking about in the Mimer, like the section that we're in, is we're trying to describe and compare how Hashem fills the world and how the soul fills the body. Because what we're trying to explain is that the Jews, this is like the meta message, that the Jews reached a higher level in the time of Purim, the time of exile, than they did when they received the Torah, even though it was the time of exile, godliness was hidden and everything else. Because ultimately what we're going to say is they tapped into like a superpower of the soul, something higher than is even affected by exile and everything else in a certain way. We're going to get to that. But in trying to get there, we're defining the different levels of godliness in the world and the different levels of the soul in the body, because the way that the soul permeates the body is a parable for how God permeates the world. So, and we can understand from the parable better because we are the parable, like we are a soul and a body, and through self-understanding, we can then extrapolate a little bit and begin to understand a little bit the analog of Hashem filling the world. So we're in the middle of that section of the Mimer, and what we've been talking about is the fact that the body is divided into 3 sections physically because it's divided into 3 sections spiritually. There's the head, the torso, and the legs. And that is representative of these 3 levels of the soul filling the body, the head, the soul filling the head level, the soul filling the torso level, the soul filling the legs level. The legs are the lowest level of the body, and they also represent the lowest soul powers, right? The torso represents is in the middle. It has organs and abilities that are more refined than the legs, and it also has the powers of emotion are more refined than the powers of motion. And then the head is an even higher level, which is the power of intellect. And then we go into a little bit of it's not really a digression, but like an aside that says, yes, even though the intellect is a higher power than the emotions, we still need to have the emotions, and we need the emotions and the intellect to talk together the same way that we need the head and the heart to talk together. We need the head and the heart to talk together physically. We also need the head in order for the person to live. And we also need the head and the heart, the inner dimension of the head and the heart, the intellect and the emotions to talk together and influence each other in order for the person to be healthy spiritually and emotionally and psychologically. The same way that we need to have the head and the heart talk together in order for the person to be healthy physically. So then once we talk about that, we have a question. Our question is, we know, or maybe we wouldn't have had this question to begin with, but somebody, who knows a little more Kabbalah would have this question, because there's a concept that it talks about in Kabbalah and Chassidus called Ru'us Liba, which is the inner dimension of the heart, the inner will of the heart, which it explains in Kabbalah and Chassidus is actually higher than the head. So we just explained beautifully how the head is higher than the heart, which is higher than the legs, because the intellect is more refined than the emotions, which is more refined than the power of motion. So everything lined up very nicely. And then we have like this question that comes in. One second. We have this idea of the will of the heart. The will of the heart is higher than the intellect. We all know that from other sources, right? This is a Zohar and other places. We say it actually in Erev Shabbos. I think it's from Tikkun Zohar. Anyhow, this idea that the will of the heart is a higher level than the head. So what do we do with that? So the answer to that question is yes, that is true. And it doesn't really take away from what we just said in the Mimer earlier, because we have this idea that there's 2 types of godliness in the world, 2 types of soul powers, or soul abilities or aspects of the soul. There's what's called the permeating light and the surrounding light. That's true of Hashem and the way he relates to the world, and it's true of the soul and the way it relates to the body. So in the permeating light of the soul, there's levels and distinctions and everything. This godliness fits nicely into this vessel and so on. Just like in the world, there's also levels of godliness that God chooses to put into this vessel, that vessel, the other vessel, nice and neat packaging. That's true. And we didn't get to the way that it is in the world yet. That's in the next section of the Mimer. It's going to tell us how that also fits into the creation of the world. But right now we're still with the analogy of the body. The soul fits into the head a certain way, into the torso a certain way, into the legs a certain way. And it's, the soul powers, the higher soul powers are higher up in the body, and the lower soul powers are lower down in the body. Okay, so, basically head, torso, legs, in those 3 general categories, right? This will of the heart, which is higher than the intellect, is of a different type of soul power. It's not the permeating soul power, it's the surrounding soul power. And there's also going to be these 2 different types of godliness in the world, a permeating level of godliness and a surrounding level of godliness. So it's true of the soul and the body, and it's true of God and the world. So in the orderly progression of the permeating light of the soul, it's head, torso, legs. However, the whole concept of the encompassing light of the soul is higher than the entire system of the permeating light of the soul. The encompassing light of the soul is encompassing because it's so to speak not small enough to fit into a vessel. So the whole encompassing light of the soul is of a different type of light of the soul than the permeating light. So in the permeating light, there's distinctions like head, torso, legs, and the head is above the torso, which is above the legs. In the encompassing light of the soul, the whole encompassing light of the soul system is higher than the permeating light of the soul system. So therefore, what's called Ru'us Deliba, which is the will of the heart, which is the will, not the intellect, it's the will is a part of the soul power, which is called encompassing, even though it's connected to the heart, even though you could have the question, why is it called the will of the heart then? But it is. The innermost aspect of the heart is called this will of the heart, which is more like it transcends the life and light energy that's enclosed within the body. The whole idea of it transcends the whole idea of the permeating light of the body. So the permeating light has these distinctions, but the transcending light is above that whole unit. So that in that way, the will of the heart is higher than the head because it belongs to a sort of a revelation of the soul, which is that level of revelation is higher than the level of revelation of the permeating light altogether.
Is that only reached by Mesiras Nefesh?
Well, Mesiras Nefesh is an experience of that, but what we're basically, what the mimer is eventually going to wind up with is when we actualize our faith, it's also an experience of that. But we didn't get there yet. So when we actualize our faith, it's also an experience of that. But even within this level of will, there's there's actually 3 levels, but there's 2 that's usually spoken about, and then one of them even has a higher level. So faith and Mesiras Nefesh are in different levels of this level of the encompassing light of the soul. And then the 3rd level is just like being one with Hashem, not even faith, not even Mesiras Nefesh. So there's really 3 levels, but the 3 levels are not always talked about. Sometimes it's just talked about as 2 levels, inner and outer.
Can we bring the encompassing down into that piece of that heart? We bring that down into our.
Well, the whole point, I mean, ultimately, we're going to wind up getting to, right, is that's the concept of a Raya Mehemna, right, where the shepherd that feeds the flock is the shepherd that feeds them. Their faith is the shepherd that helps connect a Jew to this level of their soul. That's sort of where we're going. That's sort of the whole where we're going, but we're not there yet exactly. I mean, that's really the Maimer Atzat Tzava is that's really where the Rebbe takes this Maimer and elaborates it to.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Well, we can't be a spoilers alert over here.
Sorry. That's beautiful though, Chaya. Might as well take that kid away for the week. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it is so beautiful. I like the analogy of how the heart and the head, and then how it becomes more the soul, the Ruchnius and the actual physical separate. I need more work on the physical, getting my head to do what's right for my, how your husband always says, oh, well, I want to eat the potato, go eat the potato chips or whatever he says, which he doesn't do anymore. But like that part, so hard just in itself, right? Like like the doctor says, go do your elliptical every day. And my head says, oh, I'll start that tomorrow.
Right.
Right. Like, yeah.
Right. Exactly.
But it's good for your heart to go do the elliptical. Okay. But my head says, okay, but tomorrow's another day. Right.
Right.
Like that kind of
okay.
thing.
It's true. And we're all fall, whatever that is, fall prey to that. Is that the expression? Like that happens to all of us, Yeah.
But the flock thing with the shepherd, that I love that. What's the mimer that the Rebbe takes this to?
Alta Tetzava, the last mimer that we've received
That
from the
we
Rebbe
just
to date, is basically an elaboration on this mimer of the Vekibeil HaYehudim. I mean, he quotes that mimer, and then he develops, some of the points in this mimer to different. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Chaya,
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Am I thinking correctly in thinking this is one of the reasons why, according to Jewish law, they don't accept brain death? They accept death as heart. The heart has to stop because it's really the seat of the soul.
It could be like what it constitutes actual physical death, right, is a very complicated subject in halacha. Right, exactly, because there is connection between the brain and the heart, and I mean, right, exactly, which is why also, for example, I mean, not to get too technical over here, but that's also why there's a lot of, I mean, I don't think there's any halachic, I don't want to, whatever, that's, we're talking about transferring organs and things like that, but like a heart, the transfer of a heart transplant, right, actually the heart has to be beating in order to, so that's the whole, exactly what you're saying, like I know the halachically it's not pulling the plug, all those things become very complicated halachically because the heart's beating, the person's alive, even if that's not
even if the brain's not working.
Right, so there's
Interesting.
there's lots of interesting applications, I suppose, to these spiritual concepts. Anyway. Okay, well, have a good week, or hopefully we'll see everybody on Thursday. Okay,
Thank you, Ted.
take care. Yeah. Okay.
Thank
We got a lot done, even though it was all the glitches.
Yeah, all the glitches. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you,
Take care.
Sophie.
Take care.
You
Okay.
well. Bye.
Everyone, have a good week, everyone.
Have a
Okay.
good
Good
week.
week. Yes.